Hi, this is a conversation with Professor Daniel Klein, who is Professor of Economics and Gene Chair at the Mercatus Center at the George Mason University. And Professor Klein, why is Adam Smith relevant in the 21st century?
Because he's so general and so rich and so broad. Working with, I think, the basics of human nature, I think he's very relevant for the 21st century and the 20th century and the 19th century and the 18th century and the 22nd century. So I think it's a real keeper, Adam Smith.
People usually focus on the concept of the invisible hand. Can you tell us what are the main most important ideas on Adam Smith's thoughts?
I can try. There's a lot to that. You're right. People are most acquainted with the invisible hand. I think it's important for people to see that the wealth of nations is a kind of addition to the theory of moral sentiments. It's under the broader umbrella, ethical umbrella of the theory of moral sentiments. So if we step back to the theory of moral sentiments, I feel he is there affirming an ethic of universal benevolence, that we all and always have a responsibility to advance universal benevolence. That's his term, and I like that term. The benevolence is of some kind of being, like we speak of somebody being benevolent, right? And so it's a universal benevolence because it's a sort of universal being who somehow beholds the great scene of humankind, almost as though we're like a god, like an allegory, like a god, or maybe it is God. And this benevolent beholder wants the scene of mankind to be more beautiful rather than less beautiful. And because it's a benevolent being, what it sees as beautiful is prosperity, happiness, long life, multiplication of the species, humankind. So it's actually an aesthetic idea, but it's one we can understand very well as human beings. Now, in the theory of moral sentiment, he affirms that we always have this responsibility to advance universal benevolence. And he doesn't so much go into commerce and industry in that. That's more where the wealth of nations comes in. And I see the wealth of nations as arguing that by pursuing honest income, you in fact do advance universal benevolence. It's not a perfect thing, but by and large, it works well and it's a good principle to follow. And you should be actually admired for it. Even if you're not particularly being benevolent when you do it, it still leads to consequences which the great beholder is happy about and finds beautiful. So in both of his works, really, he's morally authorizing the pursuit of honest income. And he's also authorizing generally liberal policy, freedom to pursue honest income. And he's saying in the area of pursuing honest income, of managing your own things in your equal relationships with others, that serves universal benevolence. Now, it should be remembered that the only reason he morally authorizes the pursuit of honest income is because it works there to serve universal benevolence. Where it does not work, he does not authorize the pursuit of income or grasping or enrichment or acquisitiveness. So in politics, you have a different ethic. And there you have to be morally responsible. You have to be the man of public spirit. You have to be the good politico, the good politician, the statesman. He often not often, but in key moments referred to Solon, the Athenian ruler, as a kind of exemplar. So in Adam Smith, we have a very broad ethical thing, and the economics is nested within that. But you also get in Adam Smith a kind of ethical vision and message for politics, which I think some of our liberal thinkers in the 20th century have not paid as much attention to. Okay, sometimes they've even just assumed like politics is just a domain of vice and almost crime, so that the idea is just to kind of eliminate that. And Adam Smith, he more accepts the fact that government exists. And so he develops his whole thought to recognize not only the equal relationship, that is to say, between you and your neighbor, you and your employer, and so on, also even you and someone who's much superior to you in your field, but is not legally or morally, privileged. That equal relationship, but also the superior-inferior relationship, the government and the governed relationship. So he's saying we've got these two different kinds of relationships, and he's developing things that I think try to speak to both, okay, and when necessary, distinguish. I think it's important to recognize the two. I think there's a tendency in human nature to try to flatten it all down to one kind of relationship, or try to eliminate maybe this superior-inferior relationship because it doesn't feel right. I think our instincts from evolution are against some certain privileged positions, a privileged person in some way, governing person. But I think government is the reality in the modern world, and Smith wanted to manage that reality. And so he developed his ethics for both of those kinds of relationships.
In terms of ethics, what is the opposite of Smith's ideas?
What is the opposite of Smith's ideas? I suppose one way to answer that might be Rousseau. Smith, I think, saw the modern world as a remarkable development and something almost astonishing, and something that presents a great many problems and is very difficult, and in some ways is unnatural to man, in that we come from the small band. He didn't quite know this, but it kind of fits his four-stage theory of human society. We come from the small band and have instincts about a very different kinds of social existence. And then in the modern world, we're in a great society and meet many different millions of, interact with so many people. So his ethics are more about managing and accepting the modern world and coping with it. And in a way, ethics that somehow try to that are anguished about the modern world and try somehow to recapture something that's more natural to man, something that's more primitive or primeval, in a way would be an opposite kind of ethics. I think Smith was directly engaging Rousseau when he wrote. So Rousseau kind of represents that other side of humanity, and it leads to political traditions that, or inspires political traditions very opposite of Smith's liberal inspiration.
For example?
I think many of the socialists of the 19th century dovetail with Rousseau. I think a lot of the, left today dovetail with Rousseau and find great inspiration with Rousseau. Not liking the modern world that they experience and protesting it in ways that are not actually responsible or practical in any respect. They don't really have good political answers. They're not really going to get away from the modern world. And even this kind of superior-inferior relationship in society, especially with respect to governing and the governed. So they're yearning for something and they try to sell something. And I think leftist politics generally tries to play on that and sell that. But I don't think their solutions, their policies, their values actually work out very well in many, many respects, even though they're actually tapping something, in a sense, natural.
Finally, Professor Klein, if a student approaches you and asks, how can I begin to know Adam Smith? How can I get closer to Adam Smith's ideas? What would you recommend? What book? What website?
Liberty Fund put out a very nice little collection of quotations called The Wisdom of Adam Smith. And each of these quotations is quite well self-contained. So it makes sense and makes a point even though it's, just an excerpt. I found that very useful myself in working my way into Adam Smith, and I've used it in teaching undergraduates. So I think I think the best thing is to start reading him and to hear his voice and to see his words. But that's a very approachable collection, The Wisdom of Adam Smith.
Dr. Klein, thank you very much for these ideas and these experiences, and thank you very much.